Hi, I'm Michelle Olivier, and you're listening to Hey, I Want Your Job, the podcast that looks at amazing jobs and what it takes to get them. Hi, and welcome. On today's episode, we have the indomitable Alyssa Goss, who is an expert in all things boobie. She's a lactation consultant, a wonderful person, and knows all about sort of holistic mothering. So we're going to have a lot of great questions for Alyssa. Thank you so much for joining us. I know you're insanely busy.
Thanks for having me. I mean, less busy now, but definitely busy with the children that I have spawned.
We will get to the pandemic and its effects on busyness in a minute, but I want to start with, what is your technical job title?
So my technical job title is IBCLC, which stands for International Board Certified Lactation Consultant. But my other role would also be owner, because I own my own company.
Right, which is a separate set of issues and drama.
Absolutely.
Apart from, like, it's not enough that you have to help women with baby feeding, but you also have to own a business.
Right.
So what is a lactation consultant? What do they do? What is that?
Yeah, so a lactation consultant typically people will call me after they give birth and after a few weeks of bleeding nipples or bad baby weight gain or what have you, issues come up.
These are when I called my lactation consultants. Both of those things applied. Absolutely. Yes.
I see a lot of bleeding nipples. I'm,
yes.
No stranger to it. And so I'll come in and I'll kind of take my time with the parents and teach them better latching, better situation, how to get the baby situated on the breast a little bit easier. Ultimately, I do kind of what the lactation consultants or nurses do in the hospital, but I do it after the milk has come in, after they've settled down a little bit, after their hormones have come down to a level where they can actually learn. Mm-hmm. So I kind of reiterate the things, hopefully, that they have been taught in the hospital and get them comfortable with lactation.
So this was actually a fascinating learning point for me with my second. Both of my children, I sucked at the whole natural breastfeeding thing, and both of them required intervention. Yes. So both of them required intervention. And I happen to have a very good friend of the family who is a very well-respected, well-known lactation consultant. So of course, and also the mother of a friend of mine since childhood. So of course, in tears, I called Jeannie. And at which point I discovered that there is a real difference and divide between hospital lactation people and after hospital lactation. And she was like, I have not dealt with women whose milk have come in years. And she gave me the number for somebody who does the after hospital, who was fabulous.
Yeah.
But I did not realize how much of a professional divide there was between those two things. So talk to me a little bit about more, like, why did you decide on that one? What is the difference in terms of all of it?
So I actually made a conscious choice not to be in the hospital. And that is not based on what they do in the hospital. It's based on the hospital system.
Okay.
So I have absolute respect for the women who work as lactation consultants in the hospital, as long as they're actual IBCLCs. Okay. So that's a big point. A lot of the hospitals in this area, specifically, Round Rock Hospital, Georgetown Hospital, I think even Cedar Park, they've gotten rid of their lactation staff.
Okay.
Thinking that postpartum nurses can just fill in the blanks, quickly pop the baby on. It's a lack of understanding about how complicated things can be, but also it's a funding situation, right? They don't want to spend money on a unitasker.
So talk to me about the training that you went through, because I think to the layman, and it sounds like not just layman, because it sounds like these hospitals have kind of the same approach. Like, it seems like a basic mechanical thing, like boob baby apply liberally.
Sure.
So, but obviously there's a lot of specific training that you've gone through that differentiates you from erstwhile nurses trying to help. So
Right.
talk to me about that training. Like what goes into it? How long does it take? What do you learn?
Right. So there are 3 different pathways to become an IBCLC. Ultimately, you have to do several hundred hours of field experience, and you can get those hours any number of ways, right? I did it through peer support. So I did it through La Leche League, which is
Yes.
a group founded in the 50s to help parents breastfeed. And so I come at it from a very support group kind of aesthetic, if you will. So I come into people's homes and I'm kind of like their best friend who just knows a lot about breastfeeding, rather than some RNs that may have come up through a different pathway and gotten their hours through the hospital, right?
Okay.
They're not going to have the same perspective as I do, and I'm not going to have the same perspective as they do, right? They know about a lot more about medications and interactions and all of that. So there's several hours that you have to do, that you have to record. You have to have a year-long, you have to have gone through a year-long course in just lactation. And that covers everything from ethics to medication interaction to mechanics. You know, you have to learn about anatomy, all of that. There's also all these prerequisites that you have to have. So I had to go literally back to school when I got this. After all of that stuff is done, then you can sit for the test.
Okay.
So there's an exam, like a bar exam, right?
And do you get a boob and a baby and like you have to?
No, it's just multiple choice, and it's
that sucks.
Worst. I know it's not very well done, because a lot of what I do is intuition. It's a lot of question asking. It's a lot of, you know, kind of feeling things out.
Yeah.
And multiple choice doesn't really show that. So they've actually changed it so that when you re-up, when you every 4 years, you have to, you know, get recertified. The test is, that's optional. You can just recertify through CERPs.
Okay.
So, so continuing education credits. So that has helped, I think, increase the level of education that you're seeing out there with IBCLCs. There are a lot of old school IBCLCs who just like took the test, never did any continuing ed, and like we're always learning about lactation. So, you know, that kind of was a hindrance to their clients.
So I obviously lucked out and knew a guy. But for a normal mom, I can imagine that it would be terrifying and overwhelming to have a baby. It's not working. I know I need help. How in that moment of panic and hormonal crazy, do you find a lactation consultant and know that you're getting a good one?
Sure.
Who isn't one of these, like, I've never done any, like, continuing, like, how do you differentiate in that moment?
That's a really good question. So it's one of the reasons that I really suggest that parents go to a lactation consultant while they're still pregnant.
Okay.
So doing a prenatal appointment with a lactation consultant can really kind of help you not be in that situation. You know exactly who to call. You know whether you fit with them or not. You know, if you didn't have a good prenatal, call somebody else and get them on board. I'm sure that's happened in the past for me. So, you know, that can kind of help. But if you didn't have that forethought, which, you know, pregnancy goes by really, really fast. Sometimes, and
you're like, already freaking out about other things, like
absolutely, and you're like worried about the labor, and you're focused on that, and you're not really focused on what comes after. So if you didn't have a chance to do that, then usually pediatricians will have a list, especially in the Austin area. They'll have a list of lactation consultants. They will have a list. The hospital that you deliver at will have a list of local lactation consultants.
I'm always dubious about those lists. Like, where did they come from? Are they just like, these are the people that dropped off a card here? Are these just people that are in our insurance network? Like, I know we tend to go with St. David's, and they're really bad about like whoever they refer you to is just whoever is in the St. David's network. And there's not a huge qualitative analysis from that. Like, it's not your provider here is looking at you as a mother and saying, oh, I think this person would be a good match for your particular, do you know what I mean? Like,
yeah. So there's that's where the interview part comes in. Give people calls and be like, hey, I've got your name from St. David's. I'm having a trouble with a cleft. My baby has a cleft palate and is failing to thrive, or whatever the issue is, or just a little sore. Yeah. Or have you dealt with twins before? You know,
my nipples are bleeding and I can't stop crying. Please help. That was my fault. Yeah. That was fine. Yeah.
I get a lot of crying women. It's okay. The parents are always crying to me, and that's part of it. I don't mind it. So yeah, there's not a whole lot of, I will say that your pediatrician will have a better estimation, because every single time I see somebody, I send the doctor, and I may be one of the only people in the area who do this actually, but I send every single pediatrician a summary of what we talked about, and the care plan for the parent, the care plan for the baby, whether the pediatrician needs to follow up, whether I need to follow up, weights, charts, graphs, everything, right? So that way I'm working with the pediatrician and the obstetrician sometimes, or a midwife, depending on whose issue it is, right? If the parent needs blood work, that way they have all of that stuff.
Yeah.
So that, so we're communicating back and forth.
Hormonal mom is not trying to remember to relay the conversation, because this hormonal mom sucked at it. I think I just cried at my pediatrician as well. Mercifully, he is infinitely patient and understanding and used to me at this point. So
that's lovely. That's lovely. And so, you know, and that way it's in their chart, but also I give a care plan to the parents so that they don't have to remember or be taking notes while they're also trying to feed or get their, you know, their spouse involved or whatever. So I send them also a care plan of what we talked about, and that usually kind of helps.
So all of this, to me, as a, you know, soccer mom to be, sounds amazing and like the kind of service I am used to. I will tell you that my sister would call this a bunch of bougie nonsense, because when she had bleeding nipples, that she was like, you just step them on and it's fine. We're very different in this regard.
Sure.
What is your thought about access to lactation consultants after the hospital for lower income moms? Are there, anecdotally, you hear that you have less take up of those services from persons of color and minority communities? Do you find that that's the case? Is that real, or is that just like one of those urban myths? Like, what is your thought there?
It's not an urban myth, right? And I think it has a lot to do with the culture of Black breastfeeding. Historically, Black women have had to breastfeed white babies, right? Because of slavery. Yeah. That culture has kind of made it so that Black women, there's a stigma around it, right? And it's kind of hard to explain so much, especially as a white woman, right? But it's something that we need to be really sensitive about when we're in these areas. Not only that, but I have seen the systemic racism inherent in the system, in the hospital system. So Black women and women of color, especially young women of color, get kind of a bad rap in the hospital right out the gate. And when you don't get the support you need in the hospital those first few days, things can go downhill really quickly. Unfortunately, my industry just doesn't have very many BIPOC providers. We don't, lactation consultants, it's a privileged position. Sure. My husband supported me through getting my continuing education and going through school and all of that. That's not something that, many minority women and men, I guess, but can do. They don't always have that kind of economic privilege.
They don't have the option for the free internship.
Right, exactly.
To where they want to be. Absolutely.
Exactly. I had to volunteer for 2 years to get my numbers, you know, to get my hours.
And I think that one of the things you said really resonated with me, that I know with my second, I had issues in the hospital and I really had to be a strong advocate for myself.
Yeah.
Luckily, I am well-educated, mouthy white chick with, you know, relative affluence from the greater society. And so I was in a position to be able to advocate really effectively.
Sure.
And I just can't even imagine a mom who doesn't know the system that well, who is already marginalized by systemic racism and preconceived notions of what those kind of moms are going to, you know, going to be. I can't even imagine how painful and difficult it would be in that situation to get just the fundamental care that you would need to feel confident in being a new mom. Like,
yeah. And it's weird. There are weird rumors or superstitions around breastfeeding and people of color. One of the weirdest things is that they don't feel as much pain as white people. So this goes back to slavery days, right? But it is still something that I hear in conferences from well-respected lactation consultants, that darker skinned people don't feel pain the same way white skinned people do. And it's
oh my God,
absolute bullshit. But it's being allowed to, and there's no science background. There's nothing, right? But if you come from if you hear that, right, and that's how you've been taught, you're going to ignore Black pain. You're going to ignore it. And so I have to work against the racism that I was raised up in, and fight against it and do better. Almost overly, like you have to go over and above to like reach out to these communities, to go where they go. I have done my utmost to be in network with as many insurance companies as possible. I'm now in network with Aetna and Blue Cross Blue Shield, which is the major provider in Texas, so that anybody has access to me, anybody who wants it.
So I think it's really interesting. In my sister, who is like the other side of the coin to me in so many ways, her husband is Hispanic, and with both of their kids, she was a really big advocate for breastfeeding, obviously, and despite the, you know, piranha effect on her nipples. And in both cases, his family really pushed back. And we're very much like, why are you breastfeeding? Formula's better. Breastfeeding's a pain in the butt. And apparently, at least according anecdotally, sample set of exactly one family, so I understand. But according to them, it is not normal in the Hispanic community.
That's true.
To breastfeed.
Yeah, and that's true. I mean, there's so when you get, I will say, when you get cultures that have strong family input, right, where the family sort of raises the children, I find that breastfeeding is less valued because that herd
only
mentality.
Mom can do it. Yeah.
Right. Only mom can do it. And that herd mentality kind of pushes against that.
Yeah.
So I work with, when I'm working in person, so because of the pandemic, I'm only working in telehealth. When I'm working in person, I see probably mostly Asian American. So like Indian American,
South Asian,
South Asian. So because where we live is highly populated, because of the tech industry and stuff. So I see mostly those families, and those families do have a cultural, a different cultural background than, let's say, Hispanic culture, but it's very kind of similar in that like everybody
the whole family
helps.
raises a kid.
I mean, I have seen aunties and uncles and grandmothers and all, and they're all in, like, right there.
Yes.
Great tea. I will say, I love going to those homes because you can't refuse their hospitality. So like you get a full like tea.
Oh no, I have to eat the delicious food and drink the delicious tea. Oh, it's so
rough.
sad.
It's real rough. But you know, so there's a generational thing going on too. So whereas it was very much breastfeeding is not really part of the culture now, the next generation is really wanting to, because they're reading the science, and the culture is changing, because they're kind of,
they're very pro-science culture, at least.
Right.
Very, yeah. So that makes sense. Like, you have Montessori is really huge in South Asia as well, because of the same, like, there's science behind why Montessori works.
Right.
And so you have a big investment in that culturally. So that makes sense to me.
Yeah. And part of my job, honestly, is to manage the parents. So manage the grandparents, right?
Mm-hmm.
And just be like, yeah, absolutely. The way you did it was wonderful. And it was the, right thing at the time. But for their goals, and you keep going back to the parents' goals.
Yeah.
The parents' goals, this is what we find to be true, and here's how you can help. Always like involving them, never pushing them out, but bringing them into the room, bringing them like into the conversation, and all of those things. That is always helpful when you're dealing with parents and grandparents that are kind of pushing against.
So, what you talked a lot about the things you do for business, and we talked about the fact that in addition to all of the great work you do with breastfeeding, you're also a businesswoman. Yep. So I have to ask you the gauche question we ask everybody. How do you answer when people ask you how much you make?
So many people don't. Not many people ask me. So if I start crying, it's because this has not been a thing that I've been doing well at the last year. People don't like telehealth when it comes to their naked bodies being on screen.
I can feel that.
So I'm asking a lot of people to do telehealth right now. So my business has gone way, way, way down. I am not making a living wage this year, or 2020 and 2021, I probably won't be making a living wage. Right now it's a hobby that I really enjoy helping people, so I'm happy to do. Before the pandemic, I was making like 35 to 40K a year. So I don't make a whole lot of money.
You are officially the first guest we have had who actually answered the question with a number. So
it doesn't bother me. So coming from a place of privilege, talking about money doesn't bother me. I have enough to talk about it, but not enough so that it's something private and embarrassing, right? So I could not probably survive on my income unless I did a whole lot more work. But I am very lazy, and I have no problem relying on the people in my household who do have full-time jobs. So,
so you talk about you're lazy, which implies that you know what else. So what does it take to make a successful, thriving lactation business at this moment in history?
Yeah. So so this is a gig economy, right? This is gig work. I would have to hustle a whole lot more. I would have to do a lot more
buying doctors' lunches. And
yes, absolutely. I would have to go probably be speaking at conferences. I would have to seek that out. I would have to write papers. I would have to write blogs. I have friends who have whole other businesses on billing or starting your own paperless company or website building or blog writing or whatever. So they have a bunch of side hustles. My side hustles are my 4 kids. Yeah. And they do not pay
Which is a lot. Like, don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
You have amazing children, but they are poor.
They're horrible. They're very poor. Yeah. This is it's a investment in my future, hopefully, but it does not pay well. So yeah. This is not a business that, unless you put a lot of energy into, it's not going to, and it'll pay some bills, but it's not going to be like a get rich quick scheme. And I think that, this is no MLM,
which of course is like, I think goes back to what we were talking about earlier in terms of reinforcing the privilege, right? That like, even after you manage to get all of these qualifications, etc., it's hard to make enough money to pay your bills and raise your family.
Yeah.
And so again, that reinforces that this is an option for mostly women. I'm sure there are male lactation consultants, but I feel like that would be kind of You say, I can't imagine calling somebody who doesn't have breasts to talk to me about my breasts. That seems weird.
Right.
But it definitely reinforces all of that. So let's say that the magic wand is back from the repair shop where it's been for at least 40 some odd years that I can vouch for. And I pass it to you and I say, all right, Alyssa, fix it.
Yeah.
Make breastfeeding normal, healthy, and non-overwhelmingly stressful for women everywhere. Go. What do you and the wand do?
So here's the thing. If we did that, I'd be out of a job happily. Right? My whole point in practicing is to be out of a job in 2 generations. That I don't want this job to exist anymore. By the time my kids have kids, I don't want this to be a job. I want breastfeeding to be so normal that you can ask any one of your female or male friends for help. And they can give it to you. That's how it used to be. And if you couldn't breastfeed for whatever reason, low supply has always been a thing. That's not a new thing, right? You hand the baby over to your sister, aunt, cousin, best friend, and they breastfeed for you. Like, I want that kind of utopia, right?
So I am a pretty liberated mom and pretty far down the like crunchy liberal path. And there is just something in me that goes at the idea of not me breastfeeding my babies.
Yeah.
Why?
But
Where do you think that comes from? Is that us having weird hangups about the breasts, or like what
it's
is
actually
that?
It is it goes back to cultural privilege, right?
Okay.
So back before even, don't even get me started on the slavery part, but even before that, right? This was when we stopped valuing women's work, right? Breastfeeding was something we outsourced. As soon as we became rich, we outsourced it. Now we're
Wet
outsourcing
nurses?
it, to wet nurses or whatever. Now we're outsourcing it to the dairy industry. We're still outsourcing it. We're just not using people. And so, I mean, not as much. There are milk banks. There is informal breast milk sharing. There is, pumping for other people and all of that. But we kind of made breastfeeding precious. And something only the mom can do. And we focused way too much on the bonding. So much on the bonding, because we wanted people to breastfeed again. We're like, ooh, bonding, 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 bonding. And now people are like, what if this other woman bonds with my baby? And instead
will you love her more? Absolutely.
Right.
Yes.
Right. I mean, even, in the surrogacy community, which I'm a part of, pumping for the intended parents of the baby is kind of something that a lot of times falls off because the parents are so protective of the baby.
Gotcha.
They're like, ooh, it makes me out that you're consuming this other woman, right?
Yes.
So I think we focused way too much on the bonding aspect and not enough on, this is just what human babies are supposed to eat. Like, their physicality will be better. Their bodies will be healthier. And even that wording, right, is wrong. Their bodies will be normal. They will be less healthy with formula, right? Not, breastfeeding is just basic normality. It's not best. It's just normal. So when we started talking about, how formula is better and all of that, then, all of those formulas just as good, or fed is best, or whatever. We had to put it on a pedestal. We had to put breastfeeding on a pedestal. And I'd really like to crash that pedestal down because it's really hurting families.
Okay.
Because then you get to there's only one way to breastfeed. Bottle feeding shouldn't be a thing. Pumping shouldn't be a thing. Supplementing shouldn't be a thing. And you get in these poor parents get into their heads about like, I'm not doing it the right way. I'm not doing it 100%. So I might as well not do it at all. And that's not the way I want anyone to feel.
And I know for me, like, again, that resonates. Both of my boys, I had to go hybrid. So I had the whole, I think like most moms, I had a list of things I was totally going to do and be as a mother. And then I actually had babies, and I think I have achieved like 2 of those things.
That's amazing. Fantastic.
It was a very
Good for
long
you.
list, Alyssa, a very long list. And like, I mean, everything. The first one was I was going to exclusively breastfeed
Sure.
for 6 weeks straight from the breast so that everything could, you know, stabilize before any pumping occurred, blah, blah, blah. No.
In my experience, that's
Reality
almost never
was
the case.
no.
Yeah.
And I know, like, for me, I had all of that, like, for hundreds of thousands of years, women have been feeding their babies naturally. And why am I broken and can't do it? And literally, my friend, the lactation consultant, she was like, you had a baby through IVF.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You would not have had a baby in those circumstances.
Right.
So the fact that everything else is not going the way that Mother Nature 100,000 years ago would have done things,
right.
why is this a surprise to you?
Right.
And I remember sitting there just looking at her with my mouth hanging open. And I'm like, so you're saying I've just always been flawed? And then the hormones relaxed and I was okay. Yeah. But like, I think that, you know, that message was really important.
Yeah.
For me to hear that, like, we don't live in, you know, cave times, and the infant mortality rate in those times was astronomical. So
absolutely. Not to mention the maternal death rates. Yes. So, you know, you bring up a really good point because you said 6 weeks, right? What else happens at 6 weeks? You go back to work. Right? You're expected to go back to work. We don't have maternal, you know, parental leave in this country.
But breastfeeding is protected, Alyssa, and obviously every employer is super supportive of that.
Not when I had my baby. That's brand new. That is brand new. When I had my babies, it was not protected.
And also, it's de facto not. Yeah.
Right. It still isn't. No. Yeah. Especially if your employer is a man. And you work for a small company, you have to talk to them directly, and they don't have to follow any rules if they have under 50 employees.
And even with more than that, I mean, how many women are told to pump in bathrooms, or I've heard storage closets,
which by the way is illegal. You cannot be told to do that. What I'm saying is you have recourse. Yeah. So don't feel like you have to do what they tell you to do, because damn the man. But I understand that, like, I can say that because I don't work for corporations and I have the choice not to work for corporations. There go. I do not work for a hospital. But yeah, it's, you know, it is a trade-off. I know so many parents that thought they were going to go back to work and then they decided not to because they found out that they just couldn't, right? And accomplish their goals with their parenting. So, and that I don't, you know, that works for some clients because they have that option, but I have a lot of others that we have to be really, really creative on how we get them back to work safely and securely. Yeah.
I think it's great that they have somebody that they can talk to and that helps them with all of that. I think, you know, for me, I know probably with my second one, the biggest help was just having somebody not judge me for being bad at this and coming in and saying, he's fine. You're going to be fine. You're not doing something that is crazy or doesn't make sense. Like, it's just not as easy. Like, I think there's, what's her name? There's this comedian who has this whole thing about breastfeeding, and that when you think about, like, you're on a lotus and you're this perfect Zen moment of bonding with your child to your bosom. And then they get here and it's instead a rabid piranha, like, attacking your breast. And yes, I had rabid piranhas. Absolutely. Yeah. Both of my children latched for the first time in the OR after my C-section. Like, they were still stitching me, and my kids were just like, they both lifted their heads, looked around, and went, and then immediately like, attacking my breast.
That's amazing, though.
I guess we're hungry.
Yeah, so, that's awesome, though, that you were even allowed that chance.
Oh,
that's absolutely not even normal.
Because I have all the privilege, Alyssa.
Sure.
All the privilege. We've covered
absolutely.
this.
Yeah. And I mean, that's the thing. Like, I want people to know that it's not 100% or 0%.
Yeah.
Any amount of breastfeeding is good. Um, if that is what both the parent and the baby want to do. Baby always wants to do it, but if that's what the parent wants to do. I've also helped numerous parents wean early because they couldn't handle the PTSD, the stress, the anxiety,
Yeah.
the depression, whatever it is. They didn't want to breastfeed. Okay, we don't have to do that. Let's come up with some other way. Is the breast milk important? Let's talk about exclusive pumping. Is none of this important? Do you really not like this whole thing and it makes you feel weird in your body or whatever? Then let's not do it and figure out a way to gently wean you so that you don't hurt your body doing it. So it's not about what I want for the parents. It's what they want and how I can help. I'm a consultant, right? I am not supposed to fix a problem. I can tell you how to fix it, but it is not up to me to fix it.
You're a consultant, not a wet nurse. You're
That
not
is
here to do it
absolutely
for them.
right.
So,
I am not here to do it for you.
though I feel like maybe that's a missed opportunity, Alyssa.
I looked it up when I was nursing my own kids because I have massive oversupply, which is a problem. It's a nice problem to have, but it's still a
problem. Yeah.
Yeah. So I looked that up, and there's you can make money. You can make money off of lactating. It's not usually babies who want to buy your milk, but you can.
Well, there is currently a fascinating special on Netflix that talks about. Have you seen the breast milk? Oh yeah, fascinating.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah, the kink community too. I think people don't remember about them. Yeah,
the kink community always pays very well.
Yeah, and the bodybuilders and all of that. And
we should make it clear that you are none of us are condoning the sex trade here in this podcast. We're just acknowledging its existence.
Yeah.
And letting adults make the choices that they want to make.
Yeah, I have no problem with sex work, but that's not what I do.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I feel like the thing is we have to, that whole like breastfeeding is free. Breastfeeding is only free if you are not valuing people's time, and specifically women's time, because women are the majority of who breastfeed. But I want to be very clear that women are not the only people who breastfeed. But if we're not valuing women's time and energy, then that's the only way we can say breastfeeding is free, because it takes an enormous amount of investment and time and energy and money to breastfeed a baby. It's worth it, but it does take time, and let's not pretend it doesn't.
So what does a good quality lactation consultant have to charge? What do you charge, and how does the fees work?
So in this area, so it ranges depending on what part of the country you're in.
New York City is always more expensive, as is San Francisco.
Like, you charge how much for oh my goodness,
$1 million an hour.
Yeah. Absolutely. I'm like, what? So here it's about $150 to $200 for a in-person in-home about 2 hours consultant to come out. So there are people who have, another way I could make more money is if I had a clinic where people came in and out and I'd see them for about 30 minutes. That would be a faster way of me seeing more people. It's not how I choose to do it. I only want to go to their homes. I miss it so much. I charge about $175. I do charge a travel fee if it's farther than 30 minutes outside, if it's over 30 minutes drive. But now I can do telehealth, so maybe I won't have to drive that far anyway.
So everybody listening in New York City, we have a bargain now.
Yeah, if you want telehealth, you can do telehealth anywhere. It's not like lactation changes depending on where you live.
Boobs are boobs.
Boobs are boobs. So yeah, I charge $175 for a consult. Initial consult, follow-ups are $125, and prenatals are about, I think I have them at $100, and back to work sessions are $100 too. I think that's right, because I honestly haven't charged somebody out of pocket in maybe a year.
It's all insurance.
It's all insurance. I bill insurance directly, and they typically will pay 100% of my fee, so you don't see any cost. So if you have Blue Cross Blue Shield or Aetna, like there is somebody who can see you. So that's the nice thing about taking insurance. The bad thing is billing. I hate it, and I wasn't trained in it, and I'm bad at it. So I need to hire somebody probably.
I know a girl. We can talk after.
Yay!
Okay. Well, we will have links to your website and all the ways people can get in touch with you if they do want to take you up on your telehealth. And I know that you're in the vaccine process right now for COVID.
Yep.
So hopefully once you are safe, then you will be able to be back in women's homes, helping them live and in person.
Yes.
We will all keep our fingers crossed for that day.
Yes.
For all the reasons.
Yes.
Thank you so much for your time. Is there any other thoughts or anything you want to share before we close out today?
I would just say that I don't want anyone to feel bad about the way that parenting goes for them. Have so much grace for yourself. In a lot of cases, this is the first time you've even seen somebody breastfeed before, because of our culture of like, cover the breast and don't show anything. You know, a lot of times the people I work with, that they've never even seen somebody breastfeed before. We are animals who have to see to learn. And if we never see it, it's going to be a lot harder for us to emulate it. So, you know, for those parents who do have it easy, breastfeed in public so that other people can see it. You're helping the next generation to be able to be successful.
So there we go. Alyssa's takeaway from our conversation is, ladies, get your boobies out.
Get your boobies out.
Get your boobies out. All right. On that note, if you have any questions or follow-ups for Alyssa, we will have, like I said, her contact details in the show notes, and you can always contact us at ONH for any help getting your foot in the door or getting marketing materials together to be like Alyssa. Thank you so much. And thanks everybody. Bye.
Bye-bye.
You've been listening to Hey, I Want Your Job.
For more on how you can get your own awesome job, visit ONH Consulting at www.onhconsulting.com. We offer incredible resumes, no-nonsense career advice, and real-world tips for landing a job in today's market. Check us out on LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram for more insider info. Soon you'll be hearing us say,
I'm Morgan McBride, and I want your job.
And I'm Lydia Lunning, and I want your job.
And I'm Michelle Olivier, and hey, I want your job.